Welcome on into GoldSheet TV. I am your host, Eric Pauly, with my co-host, Dan Alexander at Newbie Talks on Twitter. And if you saw the little bit of promo we did on Twitter, today we're going to be discussing some hot takes this upcoming NFL season. I want to start by congratulating my Washington Commanders on winning the 20. They finally broke down the Ravens' undefeated record. Sam Howell looked great against some second, third, and fourth string defensive backs. And that's a start at least. So, Newbie, you have any words on my Commanders going to be taking over your Eagles this season after what we saw last night?
I mean, hey man, it was finally the streak comes to an end, and of course, it was after we broke down on the last edition of Gold Sheet TV how just improbable this run for the Ravens was. So, hey, while I hope that this doesn't mean the Commanders are going to come rolling on into the season and usurping everyone in the NFC East, I was happy to see. I never like it when those streaks go on for too long. So it was. One of the most exciting preseason games. I can't believe I was locked into my TV to watch preseason football for two teams I couldn't care about. It was electric to say the least, Derek.
Yeah, that was fun to watch. But all jokes aside, for starters, liking this video and subscribing to the Gold Sheet channel is the best way to support us. And also, again, on goldsheet.com, all three products, Gold Sheet, Confidential, Kickoff, and Extra, are now one product, one price, NFL and college football on goldsheet.com. But on a serious note, Newbie and I have some hot takes we want to talk. Pretty good segue because this is not an overreaction to last night's game, but a take that I have had that I gave to Newbie yesterday before this game. I think that the Baltimore Ravens are going to miss the postseason this upcoming year. Newbie, would you agree that's a hot take, or what's your stance there?
I mean, I'm pretty bullish on the Ravens heading into the year, and we're doing a little like hot or not report. So we definitely want people to hop below in the comments here and let us know any of your hot takes. We got some good reach outs on Twitter as well, but man, I just think the Ravens, now they finally have this contract situation done with Lamar Jackson, so that's not hanging over their head. The part that I wish they brought along a little bit more was stronger receiving core, but they at least tried to answer those. And, I think also changing up what they have in an offensive coordinator so they're not going to be so run heavy as they were year after year. The training wheels are going to come off this passing game. Is that going to be a positive thing for the Ravens? That remains to be seen, but I definitely think it plays more into the hand of a Lamar Jackson, who now that they won't be running on it was like 80%, well over 60% of their plays, high above the NFL average. Now that they're finally going to add some passing in, I just don't see who pushes them as hard in this division. If you're not as big on the Steelers, I know that you're a big Browns guy, so I guess is that where the love for you is coming from? Is you think this is the Browns division and they're in the driver's seat?
So I think Baltimore is going to miss the postseason for a couple of reasons. I need to start by saying that I am a Lamar Jackson fan. Like, this is not me, not liking Lamar, thinking it's not going to work out. I've been in Lamar Jackson, unapologetically a fan of Lamar Jackson. So they have, looking at schedules, probably a relatively, middle of the pack schedule similar to last year. But I just think that the AFC North is just honestly could be the most talented division in football. I think the Steelers are much
Fair.
improved. I think the Cleveland Browns end up usurping the division and winning this season, which, as we were talking about before the show with the producer Robert as well, like when everybody's on the Browns, that normally means the Browns are probably going to finally have a letdown. But in all seriousness, so on a pound for pound, roster for roster perspective, I think the Browns have the best roster in this division. Then you have the Cincinnati Bengals, of course, who, barring the health of Joe Burrow, assuming he is 100% going to be ready to go for week one, that's just the assumption we have to be under. You obviously can't count out the Bengals, even though they did lose a couple pieces on that defense. But while they're trying to improve their passing game. Obviously, they drafted Zay Flowers. We saw the highlights all over Twitter from last night. Spoiler alert, he was going against Washington's second and third and fourth string defensive backs. So, don't think of that too much. Odell Beckham Jr., I've talked about for 2 years now how I can't believe that he gets lauded the way he still does. He's an overrated player. He got a ridiculous contract because his PR agent should probably be in the NFL Hall of Fame, not Odell Beckham Jr. And then you had Nelson Aguilar, to, Rashad Bateman, who I think is a good player, but, injuries have been a problem. I just don't see how this team goes from this offense they were running. I know they have a new coordinator to now all of a sudden being this explosive, dynamic passing threat. Like Lamar Jackson is a better passer than he's been getting credit for, but he's also not an elite top tier passer like a Joe Burrow obviously is, like a Mahomes, and so on and so forth. So I just don't expect this offense to automatically take this gigantic step forward just because of a corpse of Odell Beckham. Obviously, if Zay Flowers is that dude that could change everything, and then Nelson Aguilar, like, how is this offense really going to just take the reins and all of a sudden explode? Now, on the other hand, they did have a couple of bad games with bad luck in the fourth quarter last season that did lead to a couple losses. But looking at the defense, like the defense, which is normally the strength of the Ravens, is also a problem. It's not like their defense is loaded and they were great all season long and like their offense just didn't pull their weight. This is a unit that now, especially with Marlon Humphrey looking like he's going to miss a little bit of time, their defensive line is not really that great. Like if they're expecting progression from these young players that if they don't get, where are they getting pressure from, newbie? Like I just don't see this team in a division with just absolute studs. I think that this could just be simply the worst team in the division. And that's not a knock saying the Ravens are bad, just there's only so many playoff spots.
Yeah, I think so much of the Ravens' struggles really had to do with just the disconnect and what they wanted to do offensively and what Greg Roman was putting down. So while I don't think their defense is world beaters by any stretch of the imagination, I think they just had to be marginally better and be scoring points to maybe assuage some of those defensive woes. And then as far as the division goes, this is always a competitive division that beats each other up. And you made the great point about how we have to continue to track Joe Burrow's health, because if he's healthy, I think it's the Bengals and the Browns division for sure. But the thing is right out of the gate, the Bengals have to face off against the Browns. Then in week 2, they're facing off against the Ravens. So it's not like Joe Burrow is going to get to open up the season. He doesn't get to play the Cardinals until week 5 when he finally gets to breathe a little bit. He's got Rams, he's got Titans. So there's a lot of pass rush that he's going to be facing early on in the season. And the Ravens, again, to your point, you're going to know very early on if they're a player in this division, because in the first 5 weeks, they already play the Bengals, the Browns, and the Steelers. So all 3 of their division foes, they have to face early on in the year. So does Tom Monken make that much of a difference? We're going to know early on here. So you and I will be able to circle back to how our outlook changes maybe on the Ravens, because in those first 5 weeks, they could already be in a position where they're not talking about winning the division. They're talking about, hey, how do we scrape to get a wild card if things don't go right against those division foes right out of the gate? But I think they're set up nicely, at least the timing that Joe Burrow's coming in limping into the season, and he's got to play 2 division foes back to back. That could be a spot where they can maybe pick up a win. And one of those wins can be all the difference between making and missing the playoffs for sure, especially when you're talking in division.
100%. And it's just, again, because all these teams, right, outside of a 1 or 2 teams, they're playing the same teams in the division. Like outside the division,
Yeah.
they're playing the same teams as well. So obviously, they're, like you said, they get the Cardinals. They have easier games against the Rams as well on the schedule. But all these teams, the AFC South as well. So you have these, should be winnable games. But again, just on a pound for pound basis, I think you can just make the argument that the Ravens have the worst team in the division. Of course, you have one of the better coaches in the division, if not the second best coach in the division. And again, it's this division where you have Mike Tomlin, who's obviously top 3, Stefanski, who is arguably top 10, and Harbaugh, who's definitively top 7. So great division. Should be very exciting. It's just if Lamar Jackson sustains one more injury, like the Ravens cannot rely on Josh Johnson or Tyler Huntley to do what they did last year. Even though they got into the playoffs, they almost won a playoff game against their division rival Bengals. But just a lot needs to go right again for the Bengals, and for the Ravens, excuse me. And while I'm obviously not wishing or trying to anticipate injury, Lamar Jackson, for all that I love about him and everything, again, huge Lamar Jackson fan, you can make the case now that he is injury prone because the last couple of seasons have ended due to injury. So we will see what happens with Baltimore. But my first hot take, and please let me know in the comments below if you agree or disagree, that the Baltimore Ravens will not be playing meaningful football in January. But another team that plays meaningful football in January but just can't make it to February is the Buffalo Bills. Newbie, you think that the Buffalo Bills, I want to hear exactly from your mouth, and I want to speak for you. You think that their Super Bowl window is closed or their playoff making window is closed, or how do you want to quantify the lack of success you're kind of anticipating from Buffalo?
Yeah, I just for me it's everybody is starting to run around the track, and it seems to me that the Bills are still standing at the starting block. So I won't go as far and say the hot take that will literally make people click off of the video. If I say that the Bills aren't going to make the playoffs, I initially or automatically it's just like this dude doesn't know what he's talking about. But I think you could be looking at a situation where the Super Bowl window, if it isn't closed, somebody has their hand on it and it's going towards getting locked up simply because how much heartbreak can one team take when you have the same message in the locker room time and time again? And I won't go as far to quote the four falls of Buffalo and talk about how, you make it to the Super Bowl and it's heartbreak and heartbreak. But when I just look at this Bills team, as I said, you look at just their division and everyone in the AFC East this offseason got better. Some of it was markedly so, and some of it was, just pieces here or there. Now, do I think Ezekiel Elliott going to the Patriots is putting them into the Super Bowl conversation? No, not at all. But I think it's a team who clearly knows what they want to do heading into this season. And for me, it comes down to the Bills just kind of staying the same. You still have some maybe friction between a Stefan Diggs and management and coaching as well. Him coming off the sideline, clearly frustrated with his usage in that playoff loss. And then if you just take it out of the AFC East and look at the AFC as a whole, I think we're both really bullish on what the AFC can do this year in division, out of division, in conference, out of
1000%.
conference. If I was making a bet preseason, you know how you can always pick the AFC or NFC to win the Super Bowl. I hate to take my Eagles out of it right away, but I think the AFC would be a solid bet because there are so many good teams that are over there. And to me, it's just starting to seem like the message is going a little bit stale in Buffalo. And if you look at what they do with the quarterback too, Josh Allen, he's human, folks. Like 15 interceptions 2 years ago, 14 last season. He's a high variance quarterback. But again, that comes back to bite you. And his recklessness, we can't speak on the injury-prone nature of some of these quarterbacks and not talk about the fact that Josh Allen takes hits that he doesn't need to take in week one, in week two. So if you're talking about a guy whose hits could stack up, Josh Allen's definitely at the top of the list for me. And the last thing before I get your thoughts on why I think the Buffalo Bills Super Bowl window is definitely closing, might even be closed this season, is it comes down to one simple question. Do we think the Bills in the playoffs can get through the Chiefs when it matters? I know they got revenge. You get your regular season win, but when push comes to shove, if it's Andy Reid versus his disciple Sean McDermott in the playoffs, how many people, if all things are the same, a neutral field, how many people are taking the Bills over the Chiefs? I think it would be a tough spot there as the Chiefs just continue to look like they are the class of the AFC. So that all just has me feeling, Eric, that I don't know. I get the love for the Bills, but it's not a ticket that I'm going to be holding them to win the Super Bowl. I don't even think it's going to be a ticket I'll be holding for them to get out of the AFC.
So obviously we're trying for some hot takes, and I would love to embrace some debate here, but I 100% agree with you, right? I think that the Buffalo Bills are one of the most overrated teams in football. Like you just mentioned, they can't get over the hump with the Chiefs. It remains to be seen. Not only do they have to get over the hump of the Chiefs, they get over the hump of the Bengals also. Like this team, from a winning perspective, while they make the playoffs, they win the AFC East, which, as we know, for the last couple of seasons has been a joke of a division, realistically. This Buffalo team almost lost 2 times to the Miami Dolphins. Like, they almost shouldn't have even won the East last year in that snow game. The Dolphins gave them a run for their money. Then the playoff game, playing Skylar Thompson, and they're barely beating up on a beaten up and broken down Miami Dolphins team in a must-win game. The team, as you mentioned, in an AFC East that got better, the Jets, which had a great roster besides the quarterback last year, is now going from the worst quarterback in football to one of the best quarterbacks in the history of football. Miami Dolphins, it's going to be very tough now to quantify with no Jalen Ramsey due to that injury. That really sucks because I think that for obvious reasons that would have helped. And Vic Fangio being one of the most respected DCs in football, obviously would help. So I expect progression from them. And the Patriots are going to be terrible, which, could have made this list, and we could definitely do another one of these. But I agree with you. When everybody is getting better, whether it be incrementally or substantially, I don't think the Buffalo Bills even got that much incrementally better this offseason. Like adding Dalton Kincaid, a nice tight end help for Josh Allen, like unless this guy is Travis Kelce or George Kittle, is he actually like turning this offense that is a one-trick pony with just Stephon Diggs? Gabe Davis is a decent player. James Cook could be a good change of pace back, but like he's never ever carried a gigantic workload, so we don't really know what to expect. And this offensive line is also just nothing really to, really praise too much. It's actually probably mediocre to bad offensive line. Like, you think Josh Allen is really going to put this entire team on his back and win a Super Bowl? I think that's ludicrous. Like, the rest of the team, defense as well, is just not good enough, right?
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to for me, is not only that the rest of the roster isn't up to the snuff that maybe you're looking at your quarterback in. And then you're going to have the people who say, well, if you have an MVP style quarterback, you're always going to be in the mix. Sure, that's true. But when it's year after year, it's heartbreak after heartbreak, and you really haven't had much change as far as the message that you're getting in the locker room. Look, continuity is a good thing in the NFL. When you're returning staffs, when you're returning players, that is a good thing. But when you come with the baggage of constantly losing to older brother in Andy Reid and in the Chiefs, and just not being able to get it done come playoff time, that starts to become your culture when you don't have a change from the top down. So, could we be wrong? Could we be sitting with egg on our face? Sure, but definitely hop below in the comments and let us know if we're both seeing the same thing here, that we're not really high on the Buffalo Bills' chances this season on winning a Super Bowl, on even getting out of the AFC. Hop below in the comments or reach out to us on Twitter @SlimeAction, @NewbieTalks, and tell us why we're wrong, because Eric and I are both seeing the same thing for this team. It's just kind of starting to become, this is what the Bills are. So we'll see how that ends up playing out.
2 years ago, the Bills defense is ranked number one in a bunch of categories, but you peel back the onion a little bit and you see that they played a ton of backup quarterbacks, or they had a bunch of like weather advantage. Here you see another, quote unquote dominant season for the Buffalo Bills. Strength of schedule wise, they had a definitely bottom third in terms of easiness. They had one of the easier schedules in the NFL. This year, they play an absolute gauntlet of the schedule with the improved AFC East. You have the NFC East on that schedule as well. Now schedule as well. They play a ton of great teams. Like, you could argue that this is a top 5 schedule in terms of difficulty this year. And like we both mentioned, this team did not get substantially better by any means whatsoever. I know you get Von Miller back. I know you do have some younger players like Kyrie Lamb, the quarterback, and Gregory Rousseau and Oliver that hopefully take another step, but they've yet to take any major steps so far this season. And then also just a mention, like, you have the Jets that are going to be vying for a division title, I would assume, this year. Even if the Buffalo Bills make the playoffs, like we both are agreeing on, it's not making the playoffs for Buffalo. It's winning playoff games, making a Super Bowl, winning a Super Bowl. Like, making the playoffs for them is a failure at this point. It's not enough. I shouldn't say it's a failure, obviously. That's a little bit of a stretch. But not winning at least 2 to 3 playoff games and playing in a Super Bowl is, at this point, 100% a failure for the Buffalo Bills. But we're going to move on to another team, sticking with the AFC, because like you mentioned, Newbie, this is the hodgepodge of just great teams. So it's actually very interesting and exciting that there's a lot of debate that can happen, because there are so many good teams that, if you did tell me the Buffalo Bills went to the Super Bowl, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, like I'm so wrong. I'll gladly own it that this team is better than I'm giving them credit for. Or if the Ravens even win the AFC North, like I'm not going to be like, I'm so shocked. This is why these are considered hot takes. But a team we've discussed a little bit ad nauseum, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are chalk to win the AFC South, which is anticipated to be a bad division. I think the Jaguars, I'll go as far as to say, is the Jaguars not only don't win the South, but they miss the postseason as a whole. Am I crazy to start? Because I know you're bearish on them to win the AFC South, just because when a team that's never done it back-to-back years is now minus 155 to win a division, obviously you got to think at first, like, are you sure about that? But I think they go as far as making not even making the postseason. Is that outlandish, newbie? Or give me your thoughts a little bit on the Jaguars, because I could go on a little bit on why I think that this team is not even a postseason team.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and maybe it's since he won the only Super Bowl that I may ever see as an Eagles fan, that I'll tell you, as long as Dougie P is at the helm, it's tough for me to say this team will miss the playoffs. Am I with you? Would I ever lay money on the Jaguars to win this division? No. Go back and check out our preview on this division here on GoldSheet TV, because I don't understand that pricing at all. Eating chalk to back the Jaguars just because they limped into the playoffs last season. Like, they needed help to get in. It wasn't like they were dominant all season long. However,
they barely beat Josh Dobbs and the Titans. They barely beat
exactly.
Josh Dobbs and the Titans.
Exactly. And think about what happened in the playoffs then. You know what I mean? Like, they had to come from this miracle behind, like credit where it's due. They ended up doing that. But, I just look at the schedule that they have and the fact that they get to play a Buccaneers team who we'll talk about here in a few, that I don't think they'll be much. They get to play Colts out of the gate. So their division, I think, sets up nicely that they can pick up some wins. I think there could be a dark horse team in the Colts that could push them a little bit here, but I don't know. I'll save some time for you, because missing the playoffs, especially in this new format where it seems like any team who's even somewhat decent can find a way into the playoffs, I got to hear the take on how you think the Jags are going to be missing the whole dance entirely.
So it just starts with, first of all, the loaded talent in the AFC from a team perspective. Like, check, we got that.
Yeah.
You and I could talk for 30 minutes about which three AFC North teams can make the postseason, right? It's that competitive that you told me any combo of those three or three of those teams make the postseason.
Yeah.
I'm not debating you. Obviously, you then have the Jets and Buffalo Bills, who should be primed to make a postseason run. Then on the West Coast, you also have the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously, but the Los Angeles Chargers, a team that I did not mention in the Bills preview that I wanted to mention, on a pound for pound basis, they're a better team than the Buffalo Bills. They have a better roster. Obviously, it doesn't always convert to winning, and you could argue head coaches, but I'd also argue that Justin Herbert is a better quarterback than Josh Allen, or will be, solidify that after this season. So just like that, you have to imagine that the only team from the AFC South that's going to make the playoffs is the winner of the AFC South. We've already debated that I don't anticipate the Jaguars. We don't expect, or we don't think the Jaguars should be chalk to win the AFC South. And if there's no other spot for them to get in, they're not getting in. I'll say I can be eating my words by week 6 this season, 100%. You have Trevor Lawrence, who plays against the Colts, but from history perspective, doesn't matter which team is a lot better. Even those years where the Colts were great and the Jaguars were terrible, they are split in going straight up against each other over the last couple of seasons, because that's just divisionals. That's just how it goes. But Trevor Lawrence, says F you to the league and lights the league on fire, which is possible because you add Calvin Ridley, which I know has been the talk of the summer. But if you look at the past couple of seasons, when you do give these young upstart quarterbacks a truly elite weapon, they take a step. It's not guaranteed, but it's been shown that if they actually have some sauce to their game, adding a nice little spice to the pie is going to help them get better. But my beef with the Jaguars is that they didn't get better whatsoever. Like, besides adding Ridley, like, they didn't add anybody to their offensive line or their defense. And they lost, actually, Jawan Taylor, who was one of the right tackles. Now with Walker Little will be playing right tackle, who has barely any game experience. That's not a thing you want to do. And this defense that graded very poorly throughout the season, they didn't add anybody. They're rocking with the same cast of characters. I know you have young players like Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, who, if they live up to their potential, you're expecting these guys to improve, which is why you don't go and shelling out money for this. But I think that the Tennessee Titans, I was on the Colts at first. I've been going back and forth, but right now my head is saying that the Tennessee Titans win the AFC South. And like I mentioned, only one team from the AFC South is going to make the dance. And if it's not them winning the South, they're not. Where are they getting in? because if they didn't win the South, I'm assuming their record couldn't have been better than 9-8. And at that number, you would anticipate at least three or at least two other AFC North teams, or the Jets and Bills, one of those teams to make it, or the Chargers and Chiefs. Like, in terms of the hierarchy of good teams, they're on the bottom. And I don't think that, unless, again, Trevor Lawrence, again, goes nuclear, this team, talent-wise, is not better than these other teams in the AFC.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. And honestly, it ends up becoming a process of elimination. I tongue-in-cheek say, everyone can make the playoffs in this format. But the reality is there's 7 spots. They're not going to be the 1 seed. That's a guarantee. And if there is a potential where some of these other divisions could have 2 or 3 teams in, it starts to become the process of elimination. So if they don't win the division, I think I'm kind of with you, man. Where are they going to leapfrog over some of these other teams? It is division or bust for Jags to get in, because I think if you look at their schedule as well, sure, there's some dark horse spots where they could lose them, or could be able to pick up some wins. But if they don't, what have they done in the regular season that makes you think that they can dominate a subpar team? They could easily drop a game to the Houston Texans. That wouldn't shock me at all. So I don't know. Their yes/no prop to make or miss the playoffs, the no sitting at plus 165. I don't think that's quite juicy enough to get me on it, but it definitely at least makes my ears perk up.
Yeah, it's something that I think is worth considering. Maybe you hope they beat the Colts week 1, and then you get back in, or even upset the Chiefs week 2. But the one thing I will say, which is why, again, these are hot takes, so I would not be surprised if they blow right up in my face, is you look at the teams in the AFC that are great. Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, franchise quarterback. Bills, Josh Allen, franchise quarterback. Chargers, Justin Herbert, franchise quarterback. Jets, Aaron Rodgers, last legs of a franchise quarterback. Ravens, Lamar Jackson, franchise quarterback. And then you have the Browns, question mark. Steelers, question mark. Jaguars, franchise quarterback. So Trevor Lawrence, again, I don't want to be fading a potential generational talent, because I think Lawrence is a franchise quarterback in the making. I think that's not even debatable at this point. So that can change the whole aura of everything. But outside of Lawrence, I'm not sold on this roster. And like we've been talking about, is a very tough path to get in if you don't win the division, which is not a guarantee by any means. But talking about division winners, let's go to the NFC for the last hot take. New Orleans Saints, Derek Carr is in town. They play in the NFC South, which is probably arguably the second worst division in football outside of the AFC South we just spoke about. You think, newbie, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you anticipate the Saints not only winning the South and hosting a home playoff game in that situation, but finishing at least the 1, 2, or 2 seed at this point to host more than one playoff game in the NFC at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome down in Louisiana. Is that correct, or what is your outlook on the Saints? And tell me how good you think they're going to be this year.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've been so negative. All of our hot takes have been about teams that are going to be missing the playoffs. We'll end with a little positivity here. And I think the Saints are going to be in the playoffs. Not only do I think they're going to be in the playoffs, I think they will host a playoff game. Not only do I think they'll host a playoff game, I think they beat whoever they play in the first round. I think a lot of people are sleeping on this Saints team. Right now, they're minus 195 to make the playoffs. Everybody's talking about, the Lions, how bullish they are on them. They're going to be the darling team. The Lions are only minus 165 to make the playoffs. So while public perception on these teams probably couldn't be more different in the NFC, the odds makers are more bullish on one of these teams. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the Saints come into this year with the easiest strength of schedule in the NFL. And they also come in with that easy schedule with extremely low expectations. This is an afterthought of a team. And I think when a team has low expectations and easy strength of schedule, they have high potential. I hate to liken it to what the Eagles did last year, but the Eagles, if it weren't for their last place schedule, they probably weren't in a position that they were hosting playoff games and people had to come through the link. And this is also a team that when teams come, they have to play their brand of football. You better be ready to play the Tecmo Bowl version of football, play Madden football when you're in Mercedes-Benz Superdome. And I think they have a decent enough offense to do it. I think they geared up their backfield. That should take some pressure off of Derek Carr. And we talked about this before too. I look at Derek Carr, and this isn't like it's some great accomplishment, but he's definitely the steadiest hand they've had at quarterback since Drew Brees exited.
100%.
And again, it's not like he's going up against any world beaters, but it's not like he's any worse than teams that they've had, and they have at least been around the conversation. If he goes down, I think Jameis Winston is more than capable at winning some potential games with the chip on his shoulder that he has. And the last thing for me before I get your thoughts is, who's a threat in this division? You know what I mean? Like, you brought up how this division, and I couldn't agree more, is one of the worst in football. It's Derek Carr pairing with Dennis Allen, and these guys know some familiarity together from their time throughout the NFL. He also has a chip on his shoulder. So it's those paired together against Baker Mayfield and a whole division of rookie quarterbacks. Again, I don't think that the Saints are going to be lighting the world on fire, but I don't think it's that crazy that if this team gets rolling and gets home field advantage, they could be a threat to upset somebody in the first round as a home dog. So I think the Saints, they're going to be hosting not only one, but two playoff games with that easy schedule setting them up, Eric.
Yeah, no, and I like this take. I mean, because I know there are a lot of love. There is a lot of love for the Atlanta Falcons. You know, they have a great offensive line. They have weapons all across the field on offense. They try to improve their defense, so maybe they can take that step. Buccaneers, you know, loaded roster. I won't say loaded, but very good roster of veterans. But then you have Baker Mayfield, Kyle Trask, and Todd Bowles at the helm. So that's obviously hard to, back. Then Carolina, a team that I was very high on in the beginning of the postseason, of the very beginning of the offseason, once they, made that trade for Bryce Young. But again, not trying to overreact to preseason, but so far early results are that the Panthers are going to struggle, and history tells us that rookie quarterbacks struggle. It is what it is. The Saints last season also dealt with a ton of unlucky plays in terms of turnovers and late game nonsense that just didn't go their way. And you pair that with the fact now that they play arguably the easiest schedule, and if it's not the easiest, if it's in the top 5 easiest, with a team that just has talent up and down the roster, 12 wins is not out of the realm of possibility by any means. If you're looking at the Saints and you like their over, I think it's at 9.5 right now. Maybe look at an alternate over for like 11.5, just to get some plus money and be worth tying up a future. But while Derek Carr, like you mentioned, is the steadiest hand they've had, their offensive line is the worst that it's been in recent history, and that's while it is a knock, it is also a praise to how good this line was, but it has taken a step back. Unless Trevor Penning, the tackle they drafted 2 years ago, takes a major step forward, but that offensive line is slightly concerning, and the receiving core is a little concerning as well. Even though I think Olave burst onto the scene, but you're talking about a good team in a bad division playing against bad teams. If the luck of the draw, they had one of the worst injury lucks in terms of just like fourth quarter and turnovers last year, even goes to the median this year, that should add on at least 2 or 3 wins to a team that already won, that finished with 7 wins last year. So I can't really argue with you, especially given how weak the NFC is. A take that almost made this was that I think the 49ers are a prime to maybe not even win the NFC West, though I don't want to back you there because I'm down on Geno Smith, as we talked about. So again, we can go back into this another episode, but I'm finding it hard to debate this. My only beef, again, is the O-line not being great and Dennis Allen making a lot of bad calls last season as a head coach. I'm not sold on him as a head coach, but like you said, most stability they've had, good roster, bad schedule. Wins should be wins, no?
Yeah, and I'm not going as far to say as we had some folks reach out to us on Twitter. My man Adam Rosenberg, who you go back and forth with him as well on Twitter. He thinks that the ticket is live on the Saints to be the last undefeated team in the NFL. I'm not going that far, but hey, a case could be made when you look at this potential schedule that could be a nice live plus money ticket. It's just not one I can place, but I had to shout out our guy Berg for sure.
Of course, shout out to you at Hey Rosenberg on Twitter as well. But Newbie, that wraps us up for today. A couple of hot takes. Let us know below which takes you agree with, which takes you disagree with, and give us a reason why, Newbie and I are willing to fight for our opinions. So we'll get there. And never forget, in the NFL is the biggest sport where when everybody zigs, you got to zag. And I think we did a good amount of zagging on this episode. But again, you can follow Dan on Twitter at Newbie Talks, myself at Slime Action, and the Gold Sheet at the Gold Sheet. We appreciate everybody. Make sure to like the video and subscribe. It's the best way to help our channel grow. We appreciate you guys. Thursday will be some CFB with Dan and Matt Joseph coming up, and we'll see you guys with some more NFL next week. Thank you again.